again for being here. Hey, when our daughter Brittany was about 2.5 years old or so, we were running around in the car and getting things done. You know how you do. She's in the back seat, and we're starting to leave a parking lot. And as we leave, I turn around and notice that she had undone her seatbelt. Now, this was way before they have those monstrosity things that they have now, right? Like Houdini can't get out of those. They're just huge. But back then, it was just, And so I turned and said, Brittany, and you know how you go to turn and sometimes you brace yourself on the brake? Well, I didn't realize we were still moving. And I turned to say, Brittany, and as soon as I hit the brake, the car slammed to a halt and Brittany went flying. And she fell and she went face first onto a bolt that was on the floor of the car. And she put a big gash in her face. I stopped, I came around, I picked her up, and she's screaming, she's crying, she's full of blood, she's getting it on me, and I didn't know what to do. So we were in a parking lot, there were a couple of stores, and so I ran. The only thing I could think of is I ran to one of the stores, and there were two ladies behind the counter. I said, please, I need some help. I need to get to the hospital. And so one of the ladies says, I'll go with you. The hospital's just a block away. I'll drive you there, and then I can just walk back. I said, thank you. Bless you. So she hops in the car. She drives me to the emergency room that really wasn't far away. And I walk in the emergency room with my baby girl in my arms, and there's nobody in there. It's just me. And so I walk up to the receptionist's desk, and she is kind of a little back, just a little ways, and she kind of I'm there, and she's kind of facing this way, and I'm standing there with my little girl screaming. We're both covered in blood, and I stood there for what seemed like an eternity. It was probably a minute or two, but it was a minute or two too long for me, right? And so I'm standing there finally, and she's doing this. And she does not look up to me. She does not even acknowledge our presence. And she's doing this. I finally said, excuse me, but I need to see a doctor. And she goes, you're going to have to fill out some forms first. True story. And I said, I need to see a doctor. I have insurance, and I want to see a doctor right now. And I probably wasn't that forceful because that wasn't who I was. But I said, I really need to see a doctor. And she picks up a clipboard, and she walks over to me and shoves it in my hand and says, you have to fill out forms. So I take the clipboard and the pen with my baby girl in my arms, and I go over to a chair to try and fill out these forms. And I realized that I couldn't fill out the forms because my hands were covered in blood. So I walked back with my little girl and said, do you have something I can clean my hands with? And she rolls her eyes at me. And she walks over and goes, there's a paper towel dispenser on the wall, and she goes, shh, 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 rip. Walks over and shoves these dry paper towels into my hands. Yeah, what? Right? So I sit. By now, Brittany has exhausted herself and fallen asleep and laid limp in my arms while I'm trying to fill out this form. And I waited in that emergency room for about an hour. No one ever came in. I was all alone. And that was most of you in this room, many of you in this room have no concept of this, but this was pre-cell phone days, right? So I could not call my husband. He had no idea what was going on. And I sat alone in that emergency room with my bleeding baby girl in my arms. Finally, a nurse comes in and says, follow me. So she takes me back to the little emergency room and starts to walk out, and she goes, the doctor will see you soon. Swoosh. The curtain thing, and she leaves. She leaves. And I'm still left there alone, and I put Brittany on the table, and again, a little while later, the doctor comes in, and he walks in, he does this. She's going to need stitches. I'll call a plastic surgeon. And he walks out. Whoosh. Yeah, I know, don't visit this hospital. So I'm still there, and just a little while later, he and a nurse, both of them, come walking back whoosh, into my little area. And he goes, The plastic surgeon is about 20 minutes out, and then he'll be here. And they both go to leave again. And I said, excuse me. Excuse me. But you know what? I know my daughter's not dying. I know she's not dying. And I know that head wounds bleed a lot, and that's why they're so, I get that. And I said, and I know all she really needs are some stitches. I understand that. But what I really needed was just for one of you to look me in the eye and say to me, it's going to be okay. Just one. It's Mrs. Johnsen, it's going to be okay. Jesus came with the message to us. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. These last several weeks and for all of the month of December, we've been what we call our playlist. That's been our sermon series. And what we've been doing is taking the words of some really familiar songs that we sing and kind of dissecting them or looking at them a little more intently and the truths that they have. And it's amazing that sometimes we can sing and miss the truths that we sing. And one of those songs that I just love, simply because of the words and the truths that just impact me every time. It's taken from the song, "O Holy Night." Perhaps it's one of your favorite ones too. But I'm going to read the words. I'm not going to sing it. For that, my husband is thankful. You know, when I say I don't sing, I really don't sing. You know, we all have gifts. We all have gifts. That's not mine. And if I sang it, you would not recognize the song. So I'm going to read you the words this morning. It goes like this. "O holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, until he appeared, and the soul felt its worth." I love that, but that's not the one I'm focusing on. A thrill of hope, all of a sudden, there's a glimmer of hope for us. And the weary world rejoices. When he appeared, the weary world rejoices. For yonder breaks, there is coming a new and glorious morn with the promise that things can be different. Because he appeared, our weary souls can rejoice with the promise that things can actually be different. Now, no doubt in this world we are weary. There are the things of this world that tear at us. This isn't the kind of worry, the worry I'm talking about isn't the kind that a good night's sleep can take care of. Some of you understand that. This is a weariness of the soul that we often experience simply because we live in this world. There are things that tug at us. There are external things, and there are internal things that can bring about a deep weariness. For example, and we've all experienced one or more of these, finances that are stretched. We're exhausted because of worry and the feeling of insecurity that brings. Our relationships are strained or they're torn apart, and we're discouraged and we're confused and we're angry. The relentless pressures from our job or the fear of losing our job. The crazy pace of life. That's huge. There's just little room in our hectic schedule. There's just so little room to breathe, to make sense of things, to get our bearings. We live such scattered lives. Our lives are pulled in 1,000 directions. And that brings a soul weariness, whether we recognize it or not, that tears at us. We're wounded at the hands of others, or we beat ourselves up for our failures, and shame rules the day. You know, shame in our lives only has one message, and it's the same message over and over and over again, and it's this: you are not enough. You are not enough. It's time we begin to recognize that message, that it's old and it's tired and we need to put it away. But it tears at us and it wearies us. Now, I don't know how you felt when you came in this morning, but man, we should be weary. This is a long, I was good until I came. I feel kind of weary now. That wasn't my intent. But all of us have lived this at some point, or even now. Most of us are in the midst of one of these things that cause weariness to us. And then we look at this Christmas season and we go, how on earth can we rejoice? How can we actually sing the song, "Joy to the world, the Lord is come," when there is so much that weighs on us? When Jesus began his public ministry, he decided to say, I'm going to tell the world, I am going to proclaim to the world, this is why I've come. And if someone were to ask you, so why did Jesus come? You could answer them this. His proclamation was recorded in the book of Luke, chapter 4, and you'll see it on the screen behind me. Luke records, and he went to Nazareth, speaking of Jesus, where he had been brought up, and on the Sabbath day he went into the synagogue, as was his custom. He stood up to read, and the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was handed to him. And he began unrolling it. And he's finding the place. He's looking for a place in the scroll of Isaiah where it says these words. And Jesus says this: "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." And I forgot to put verse 20 on there, but it says this: "And then he rolled up the scroll, he handed it to the attendant, and he sat down." Boom. Right? That was a drop mic moment. And he sat down. Jesus declared in that day, in the synagogue, he said, "This is why I've come." This is what Christmas is why we celebrate his coming. I have come to proclaim freedom from bondage and oppression. I have come to give sight to the blind. I have come to preach good news to the poor, to bring good news to the poor. Now, we might not consider ourselves, or perhaps we do. Most of us in this room wouldn't consider us poor, but we are needy because we're needy people. We just are. Every one of us. We're needy. Some of us are bankrupt and we say, I can't do this anymore. Here's the great thing. Jesus says, that's why I've come. I've got, for you who can't seem to do this anymore, have I got good news for you. For those who are in poverty of soul and hopelessness. You know, all of these things that Jesus mentioned about freedom from oppression and good news and sight, these aren't like physical. Like we're not in bondage physically anymore, right? But what these are conditions of the soul. Jesus came to bring freedom to our soul and good news to our soul and sight to our soul. He came to free us. What does he free us from? He frees us from our fears. He frees us from the things that just simply paralyze us. And we can't seem to take another step forward because there's so much anxiousness and fear. He came to give sight to the blind. Many times we're blind. We can't see beyond. A lot of times our circumstances, right? They're so close to it. We can't see anything beyond our circumstances. All we see is what's right in front of us. And Jesus said, I've come to give you sight, to let you see reality, to see what it's real like. And so often it's even our own ambitions, it's our own wounds, our jealousies, our pride that keep us from seeing as we ought to see. Basically what Jesus did, he came to say to us, it's going to be okay. Whatever you're going through this morning, whatever, maybe even now as I'm speaking, you've identified a weariness. You've come in with something that has been weary to you this week. It's been on your heart, it's been on your mind, and you've come with that. The good news is Jesus has come to say, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You know, the thing is, though, is that we've made Christianity about so many different things. We've made it about right methods and right doctrine and right behavior and right beliefs and doing this and don't doing this, right? We have made Christianity into all of this. But Jesus did not come to give us a religion or a set of beliefs or a list of do's and don'ts. He didn't give us beliefs to defend. What he gave us was himself. It was himself. Not a list of do's and don'ts that make you feel guilty because you don't live up to them. That's not why he came. He came to give us himself. Christianity is not about trying to live up to these impersonal rules or these abstract ideas. Jesus didn't come so his name could be on a plaque on your wall or a sentimental feeling in your head. Jesus came as a presence, as a person to be responded to. He came as a person who lives in us, who frees us and gives us life and brings redemption. He came to give us himself. He came so that in this world we are not alone. We are not alone. Now the thing is, he doesn't swoop in. Oftentimes we want Jesus to be the guy who swoops in and makes everything better, right? Jesus, I just need you to make this better. He doesn't often do that. He doesn't swoop in and go, woo, like a fireman rescues us from a burning building. Oftentimes what he does is he comes and as a friend and sits with us, and he offers the comfort and the strength of his presence in the midst of our struggles and our troubles. He comes to be with us. Several years ago, one of my other daughters, Danae, her and I were driving to Moses Lake and the highway between here and Moses Lake. And a car from the oncoming traffic swerved into our lane, and we were involved in a horrific accident. The engine was demolished. You couldn't see an engine had ever existed, and the windows were shattered. But the miracle of miracles was that we were okay. I mean, the police officer said later he didn't expect to find anybody alive in this accident. But we were unharmed, actually untouched in this horrible accident. And I chatted, people came running. A man chatted with me through the window, and he's asking me my name. And I said, would you call my husband? And he called my husband, who, funny story behind that, super quick, is I said, would you call my husband? He goes, sure. And I gave him Daryl's number. And he went and called Daryl, and he came back. He said, I called your husband. I told him you were in an accident, but you were fine. Okay, good, thanks. Well, Daryl got this message. Your wife's been in an accident, but she's fine. Oh, good, thank you. Click. That's what he did. Yeah, what? Oh, she's fine. He was entertaining people at our house. Oh, she's fine. Finally, after a really long time, he never showed up, and the paramedics were there, and they were trying to get us out. I found my cell phone, and I called him. I said, where are you? He goes, doing this. I said, I've been in an accident. He said, but you're fine. No, I'm not exactly. Not exactly fine. I don't have blood all over me, and I can talk to you, but I really wasn't that fine, right? So, adrenaline is a wonderful thing, and it got me through the jaws of life and the people talking and the paramedics, and I'm chatting with them, and I'm chatting with the x-ray technician and the doctor, but I'm feeling myself more and more, it's becoming more and more difficult to hold it together. You know what I'm talking about, right? It's really hard, but I didn't want to fall apart, and I'm chatting, I'm trying to keep myself together. And I was able to do that until Daryl walked through the door, right? And then it was just, then I'm just a puddle on the floor, and I just lose it all. Because there's something about presence that allows us to do that. There's something about presence that says you don't have to carry it anymore because I'm here. The same thing happened with Brittany, is, no cell phone. So finally when I was sitting there alone, I don't know where I found a phone, but I'm holding it together this whole time. And I call Daryl on this phone, and I do this. Daryl, you know the pause? There's been an accident, and wow, there I go all over again. But there's something about that. Later that night after we left the hospital, because we were treated and released, that night I'm in my bed, and a dear friend of mine comes over to visit with me, and she sits on the end of my bed, and she's talking with me, and it's just so good to have her there, right? And I feel myself starting to doze off, and she starts to get up to leave. I said, oh, would you please stay? Would you just stay until I'm asleep? It's presence. If you've ever lost a loved one, you know what it feels like to have people come to the funeral. They don't have to say anything, but just their presence being here. That's what Jesus did. See, the thing is, when we're in trouble, what we really need is presence. What we really need is someone to say, it's going to be okay, and they are there for us. When Jesus came, do you realize that God gave his son two names? Two names when his son came. He sent his son to this world. The first name was Jesus, right? And in Matthew chapter 1, verse 21, it says it like this. And it's the angel Gabriel speaking to Joseph. And he says, she will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. Just 2 verses later, we hear the second name that God gave his son. In verse 23, the virgin will be with child and will give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. Now, it's significant. God chose these names. I always often thought, if I was God, what name would I give my son? Right? Of all the names you could pick. But he chose Jesus, which means Savior, and he chose Emmanuel, which means God with us. Now, the pairing of these two names is very strategic, and it actually it enlarges. It's huge because it enlarges our understanding of salvation. You know, oftentimes we think of salvation often in terms of past, right? And often we'll say, well, I was saved when? Right? That's when I was saved, you know? And we often think of it as a past event. Or we'll say something like, I was saved for the future. I'm going to heaven. I'm saved. And somewhere in between this, we miss this part of being saved. Being saved wasn't just a past event, and it's not a future event. It's a reality of today. It's a reality. But oftentimes we also think of being saved as Jesus swooping in and making things better. We don't really want Jesus. What we really, really want is for him to fix things, for him to make things better. And then when he doesn't, we go, what? When really in the midst of our unfixedness, he offers himself. He offers to be the one who is with us in the midst of our mess. And we really just want him to fix it. And we're so disappointed when he doesn't. But the reality is, there is so much in life that cannot be fixed. There's just things that, and the problem, of course, is that, you know what brings some of the most weariness to our soul? Is when we try so hard to fix things that are not fixable. It will wear you out. And Jesus came to say, I will be with you in your weariness. See, the word, Greek word, oftentimes in the New Testament is a present tense. It's the word sozo. And it's a present. In other words, and sozo means healing or completeness or wholeness. And someday we will be completely whole, right? Someday we'll be completely complete and completely healed. Someday we will. But it also means for right now that Jesus died, Jesus came for us to experience daily salvation, a daily of him redeeming our lives and healing us and making us whole daily. It's a present reality. You know, there's a theological term for it. It's called progressive salvation. Basically, it means is that Jesus is at work today redeeming our lives. He's making us whole. He is actively at work in your life this morning, bringing healing to the weary places of your heart, to the things that just exhaust you, the things that tear you down. Our salvation is about experiencing God's very real presence in the mess of our unfixedness. That's what our salvation. It is those, yes, but it's this, and we oftentimes miss this, the in-between, that he is actively at work in your life with your loneliness, bringing healing to that, your discouragement, your brokenness, your resentment, your fears. He is actively at work bringing life to those places. And sometimes we can miss God's presence because we are so intent on fixing things ourselves. We miss. But Jesus, Emmanuel, has come. And I think our salvation is really a matter of having our eyes open to both those things. Is having our eyes open that we might see and experience the God who comes to save us. Psalm 46 says, verse 1 says this, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. An ever-present. It doesn't say he swoops in, makes things better. He is our refuge. Jesus offers his presence as a place of refuge and safety to go to and a presence in the midst of our troubles. Jesus came to say, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. But we often miss it because the joy that he offers, the peace that he offers, the strength, the comfort, oftentimes we just miss that because we blow right past it because we're so busy. We live in a distracted culture. It's this, and the distraction is relentless to us. It's every nook and cranny of our lives is crammed. Do you feel that way? It's just crammed. And funny thing is, in the season of Christmas, season of Advent, we cram more stuff, right? It's even more. We thought it was busy before. It's really busy now. And it's really, really hard to stay focused on Jesus who lives in us and promises to heal us. It's just really hard. So how do we do that? So I don't have 3 points this morning. I have one. And you go, yay, just one. Yay, it's really hard. I only give you one because it's really so hard to do. And it's this. The song that says, let every heart prepare him room. The thing is, that is really, really hard to do. It's really, really hard to do, to create the space in our lives long enough so we can focus our hearts on Jesus in us and what he's doing. It's just really hard to do that. In our crowded lives, we really want to experience the comfort that he offers, but oftentimes we miss it. And that's why we celebrate Advent. I didn't grow up celebrating Advent, but I started this tradition when my kids were small because I love the idea behind it. Advent is, the word Advent means coming, and preparing our hearts in Advent for the coming of Jesus. And basically it's the 4 weeks before Christmas Day, where during these 4 weeks you intentionally create space, intentionally focus on why Jesus came, to heal us, to make us whole. And we light candles, and those are just reminders. Those are just like points of reminding that in this moment I'm going to shove away. The thing is, as I talk about this, about making space, this is like a real reality. You can't just go home and go, that was a really good idea. It doesn't happen that way. You will still miss the comfort and the peace that God brings. You're going to have to, and the Advent candles do this for us, you are going to have to actually make space. And I don't know what that looks like for you. I have no idea. But we miss so much of Jesus coming in our lives today because we don't create that space. So my challenge for you this morning as we close is this. Would you this week be really intentional? Just go, I am going to create space. And we will all say, but I don't have the space. You don't. But you have to create it. You'll have to say no to something. So I can attend to God's presence in me and say yes to the things that he's doing in me. I close with this. The wonder of a Christmas, and we talk about the wonder of Christmas a lot. The wonder of Christmas isn't a sentimental feeling or a magazine, picture up of your home. And the good news is, you don't have to opt out of Christmas because it's none of those things. You don't have to just try to have hope to hang on through this season because it's none of those things to you. You don't have to opt out. The wonder of Christmas means that we don't have a God who is afar off and indifferent to our suffering, but that we have a God who is close and near and understands everything that we're going through and offers us hope. The wonder of Christmas is that we are not alone in this world, but we have a Savior who lives in us so that we can experience peace and joy and comfort in spite of the discord of our days. Christmas actually is for the wounded. Christmas is for the beaten down. Christmas is for the lonely. Christmas is for the desperate. Christmas is for the fearful. And the funny thing is that Christmas is for those who find it hardest to enjoy. Christmas is for you this season. Our band has come and they're going to sing some words. We already sang it earlier this morning, but I want to highlight these words to you. And they go like this. For the unclean, the unholy, the broken, the unworthy, for the wounded, for the hurting, for the lost, and for the lonely, Jesus, you came. Jesus, you came. Let this song be a refocusing time for you. Maybe this is the space, in this, even just a couple of minutes, this space of time, allow your hearts to be refocused. You've been trying so hard to get life fixed, and the harder you try, the more elusive it becomes, and the more weary you become. We're looking for all of these things in all the wrong places. And I think so often the place that we look to the most is control. Control. We're trying to keep it together, and then all of a sudden we can't, and life falls apart. We weren't made to carry the weight of this world. God created us to need a Savior. We weren't meant to create the weight. And if you do, it will wear you out. And you'll not experience the joy and all of the things that Christ offers to us. So allow these words this morning, if you would, to saturate your heart as we sing.